Okay, so back on it. Let's just change the color of my pen so that we can focus on the new problem. So for number one, we have P of x equals G of H of x. So we've got a chain rule problem. So for the chain rule, we take the derivative of the outside, G prime, we keep the inside the same. Then we multiply by the derivative of the inside, H prime of x. All right, so that's what P of x is going to equal. But now because we're doing P of 1, I'm going to just erase those x's and put a 1 in there. So P of 1 is going to equal G prime. Now careful, this is of H of 1. So we're not doing G prime times H of 1. So we're doing G prime of H of 1. So first thing I need to do is find out what H of 1 is. So H of 1 is negative 1. So G prime, and then I'm going to replace H of 1 with what it's equal to, which is negative 1, times H prime of 1. All right, so final answer is going to be G prime of negative 1. So I go to G prime of negative 1, that's negative 2, times H prime of 1. H prime of 1 is 2. So my final answer, P prime of 1 is equal to negative 4. All right, on to the next one. We'll switch pen colors. All right, so we have K of x equals H of x divided by G of x. So that is the quotient rule. Be careful here, don't do the product rule. That's common mistake on that part is that I've done it in the past too myself in my work. So just be careful, guys, that we do the quotient rule. So the quotient rule is forgot to highlight my pen. U is equal to the numerator, H of x. V is equal to the denominator, G of x. U prime is going to equal H prime of x. V prime is going to equal G prime of x. So when we do the quotient rule, it's equal to U prime V, H prime of x, G of x, minus UV prime, H of x, G prime of x, all over G of x, V squared. So G of x squared. Okay, so that is the quotient rule. Now, because we're evaluating it at negative 1, I'm going to just erase all these x's and replace them with a negative 1. All right, now that I have them all replaced with a negative 1, I'm going to go ahead and evaluate all of those. So we've got H prime of negative 1 is negative 3 times G of negative 1. G of negative 1 is negative 15 over 2 minus, next one is H of negative 1. H of negative 1 is negative 5 times G prime of negative 1. G prime of negative 1, negative 2. All over G of negative 1. G of negative 1, negative 15 over 2 squared. And now I look at this and I'm like, yuck. But guess what? On an AP, whoop, box that in as your final answer because it's all numeric. We don't have to sit there and be like, oh, okay, negative 3 times negative 15 over 2. I mean, you can. If we do it, you wind up getting, just so that you know for your own sake, K prime of negative 1. If I had time to kill and I wanted to find this, it's 2 over 9. But what I would do personally, I would box that in as my final answer over here. Okay, that's what I would do because I don't want to spend my time multiplying that out. Okay, I did all the hard part up here. All right, on to the next one. We've got the f of x times h of x. So that is product rule. All right, be careful with this, guys. It's not g of x. I changed it. This is f of x, so you got to just be mindful of that. So we've got u is f of x, v is g of x. Oh, nope, I lied. V is h of x. So u prime is f prime of x. V prime is h prime of x. All right. So u prime v. So f prime of x times h of x plus uv prime f of x times h prime of x. Okay, but now it's at 2, so I'm going to erase all the x's and put in a 2 there, just so that I have space to do it because we've got a lot going on. All right, so now I have to just be mindful that this is F. It's not G, so I'm not going to use anything here in the blue. Okay, I'm not going to use anything here in the blue. Let's tackle our H's first and get those substituted in, and then we'll figure out what the F's are. So H of 2. H of 2 is 6. H prime of 2 is -4. Okay, so now we need F and we need F prime. Okay, when I look back up, this is the graph of F. So if I want to know what F of 2 is, here's the graph of F. At 2, it's at 0. F of 2 is 0. F prime of 2, that means at 2, what's the derivative here? At 2, what is the, when I say derivative, you say slope. So what's the slope at 2? So f prime of 2 is going to be, it's going down 2 over 1, so -2. So we've got final answer, -12 plus 0. So t prime of 2 is equal to -12. All right, and on to the next. Okay, so for the next one, we have a function inside of a function. That is chain rule again. So be careful with this. For chain rule, we take the 3, we bump it down. We keep the inside the same. Then we subtract 1 from the exponent. Then we're going to multiply it times the derivative of the inside. Derivative of the inside is g prime of x. All right, now because it's saying at 3, we're going to erase those x's and we're going to put in a 3 there. Okay, so now I need to find g prime of 3 and I need to find g of 3. So g prime of 3 is -2. G of 3 is -15 over 2. So g prime of 3 is -2. G of 3 is -15 over 2. Okay, now if this were me, I would box this in as my final answer, guys, because I don't have to sit there and multiply it out. If I did, I would get n prime of 3 equals -675 over 2. Okay, because that's 15 squared is 225. 225 times 3 is 625. And then we've got 4 when we square that, dividing it by 2. All right, and that's where that negative comes from. Okay, last one. What color should I do? Let's do bright green. All right, so we've got the integral of h prime of 2x. Notice on the inside, it's more than just a plain old x. So we're going to use u sub. All right, so my u is equal to 2x. du dx equals 2. du equals 2 dx. So dx is equal to 1/2 du. All right, so when I substitute it in, I leave those bounds blank for right now. H prime of u, and then because it's dx, I have to substitute what dx is equal to, which is 1/2 du. So now it's a u here, a u here. These bounds need to be used, so 2 times 0 is going to be 0. 2 times 1 is going to be 2. So those bounds are now my u's. Now I do the antideriv, so 1/2 is a constant, it stays in front. Antideriv of h prime is h of u, and then we're going to evaluate that from 0 to 2. So now because my bounds are u, I don't have to plug back in for the u's or anything like that. We get 1/2 h of 2 minus 1/2 h of 0. Okay, so 1/2 h of 2, which is scrolling up to the top, h of 2 is 6, minus 1/2 h of 0, which is scrolling up to the top, h of 0, 4. So we've got 3 minus 2. Final answer, it equals 1. All right, so that was it. That was a tough one, guys. That was the toughest one I can come up with to challenge all sorts of skills of yours. All right, that's it.